Hello, everybody. I'm gonna take this off. I'm so nasty right now. Yeah, I just gotta do this because I'm just having a rant. Basically, right now, I saw something. Oh, there's my hand. That's professional. I saw something that was talking about is an interpretation of what someone had for something Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni were talking about, in terms of how they're trying to kind of retcon some of the sequel trilogy stuff in Star Wars, especially in this instance, the idea of Rey copying the Skywalker surname. Apparently, according to this guy and his sources or whatever, the idea was, or is going to be, that they're going to retcon it in terms of she's a Skywalker, or can be considered a Skywalker, roughly because Ben Solo's essence, life force that he gave up to save her is in her, and therefore she can be considered a Skywalker. Now, my first thought is that so Ben is inside her, and that makes her a Skywalker. That might actually be worse, saying it like that at least, than her just sort of copying the surname as an adoptive name because, you know, her own family history is a little suspect. Which I really wish they would have kept her being from no sort of family. Not really having a background, just being someone who could be that powerful. I mean, as much as I still want to see, you know, a Skywalker legacy, and as much of a fan as I am of the Legends, now called Legends stuff, having Rey and her just sort of magically Mary Sue powers being just a kind of person on her own without any of that other sort of, is that a hive? Oh, it's just a weird growth. Anyway, just having her be, you know, the nobody, I thought was a way better choice. So apparently Ben Solo is inside of Rey, and that's what makes her a Skywalker. Couple points to that. Number one, she could probably only be a Skywa because Ben Solo is only half a Skywalker, so to speak. But you could also, besides how bad it sounds that Ben Solo is inside Rey and therefore she's a Skywalker, beside the fact that Ben Solo is half a Solo, besides that, you could easily, the biggest sort of no about that at all is easily, well, she brought him back to life first, and then he brought her back to life. So you could easily say, pardon me, you could easily say, well, that doesn't really work either, because it could be just he gave her back the sort of energy or chi or force or life force or ki or mana or whatever it is it's going to be back to her. So he was ostensibly just sort of a walking battery reserve for her own power. So his whole thing about so she put energy into him ostensibly to just be able to get it back later on. You know, almost sort of like Spock putting his sort of mind, consciousness, whatever into Dr. McCoy, in order that, you know, part of him could kind of live on, and then eventually, you know, bring him back in with his revitalized body and later on. But I mean, it could just basically be that, you know, and then therefore when Ben Solo brought Rey back after she sort of died, then all you could really easily say all that was him returning the essence, the chi, the ki, the force he gave her back to her. So, I mean, so just having her be a Skywalker because of that doesn't really make sense with that, because otherwise you say, okay, well, Ben Solo, after Rey brought him back, is part Palpatine then. But then you'd be like, well, maybe that Palpatine part wasn't mixing right with his Solo Skywalker part, and he gave that back to her, bringing her back to life. And when he did that, since that was the thing that was animating him after his death, since that animating thing was now gone, so it's almost like, so he's a sort of battery reserve zombie. So he was only still alive and kicking because of the piece of Palpatine that Rey gave him, and then he gave it to her back. And since that was the thing that brought him back, his animating now essence is gone, and then he died. So you don't have a sort of back and forth, alive, dead between the two of them. But anyway, having Rey be a Skywalker because Ben Solo is inside of her, it sounds awful, and there's a huge, massive, really bad sort of hole in that sort of idea for the canon. So if I love Dave Filoni and what Jon Favreau is also doing with Star Wars, what they're doing individually and together is awesome. It's interesting to me that a lot of people just kind of seem to be defaulting to Jon Favreau as opposed to Dave Filoni, which doesn't make much sense to me, considering Dave Filoni is sort of like the heir apparent to George Lucas and, I don't know, Clone Wars, Rebels. If that stuff wasn't successful, I don't even know if Mandalorian would have been made. You know, and then Dave Filoni has still got a lot of creative control, thankfully, over a lot of the other stuff, and with, you know, Jon Favreau as well. So as much as Jon Favreau is doing, let's not forget Dave Filoni, folks. But as good as they are with Star Wars, and as good as they are of trying to fix the utter debacle that the sequel trilogy made, and I was like, I wanted to like it, and Force Awakens I liked at the time. Last Jedi, honestly, I liked it at the time. I didn't agree with what they did with Luke so much. Probably, I mean, part of it is because Legends Luke is so freaking awesome that, you know, that Luke was kind of like not great. But the idea of, you know, in order to evolve and progress, there's certain things you kind of have to let go of. You still can keep some of the traditional stuff to help you get to the point, but then you got to let go and move on and be your own person. So there was stuff with that I liked. The Rise of Skywalker was an utter piece of garbage from the absolute get-go. And J.J. Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy are both to blame for that. And I think a lot of the sequel problems Kathleen Kennedy has to do, they didn't have a grand sort of scheme of what they wanted to do with things. They were just doing stuff in a reactionary fashion, willy-nilly. Kathleen Kennedy had whatever agenda she had, and instead of being able to work that in the characters and in the story in a mature, actual storytelling way, she just ham-fisted shoved it in there. You know, it took the square peg, the round hole, and took a sledgehammer and mashed it in there. And it was like, why doesn't it work? So having her not be involved is fine with me. And, but now the trying to sort of retcon the sequels, yeah, it might not work so much. You might actually have to regulate the sequels you might have to flip this. Put the sequels into Legends. Put, you know, the old Legends, build a new canon starting from where they're at now in terms of, you know, Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch, Mandalorian, and then the, you know, Kenobi show, the Ahsoka show, Book of Boba Fett, Mando 3, all those other ones will build out post Return of the Jedi and try and fold the older Legends stuff back in, and the sequels get regulated into now Legends. And the real retcon is what Dave Filoni has already set up with that World Between Worlds. You know, that's the real retcon, is you use the World Between Worlds, have some moment, maybe even with Luke, maybe Luke and Ahsoka together. She can bring him there, and then he can see, here we go. Ahsoka can bring Luke to the world between worlds. Luke sees the alternate realities. The sequel trilogy is one alternate reality. The Legends canon is a different alternate reality. And maybe he takes a third path, a middle path between the two, maybe? Or just sort of, is able to see, hey, because some of the Legends stuff looks like, well, if we go that way, then the Yuzhong Vong come and completely invade and screw up the whole galaxy. But if we go this way, the First Order comes in, screws up big stuff about the galaxy, blows up whole planets. A new Jedi Order is destroyed because I had a moment of sort of, I had a panic attack, ostensibly, and my nephew freaked out over it. Instead of us talking about it, he decided to be a mass murderer. So maybe there's something they can do in some sort of middle path with that. But they already built in the world between worlds. If you're having Ahsoka come back in, that can be a really big thing with it. If you're bringing Luke into more and him having an awareness of things that are going on, maybe Grogu's got something where, he's got maybe some weird sacrifice he makes to be able to close down one world and another, sort of like Kanan. Is able to sort of teach something, maybe pulls a Kanan on things. I don't know. But I think there are better ways that you can retcon the sequel trilogy and Rey's whole thing with Rey Skywalker BS at the end than Ben Solo is inside of her. No. So, I hope that's just speculation. I hope that's not really where they're going to go, especially since before the video I was watching was even 90 seconds further from him saying it, I already thought of what I explained on this little rant. So it's very easily sort of BS. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. That went on probably twice as long as I meant to, but if you've watched any of my videos, you know that anything is probably going to go on a lot longer than I mean it to. All right. May the Force be with you.